Official pod is on the move down here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Time for some practice takeaways. The New York Jets and the Carolina Panthers getting after it on a scorching Thursday morning. Quincy, you hanging in there?
I'm going to make it. As you can see, I'm glistening in this sun, but, it might make me look a little better on camera right now, so I'll take it.
Dudes, we opted for the hats. I think that's a smart move right now.
For sure, yeah. The sun, as they would say, is sunning right now. And
absolutely.
Like you said, I think as soon as we stepped out here, we started sweating.
Yeah.
The crazy thing is the temperature isn't that bad. It's just the sun, the direct sunlight, like to your face.
All right, so nobody's going to feel bad for us right now. We got a chance to cover an NFL practice. I wanted to ask you guys as former Jets, how many times did you ask today, do you miss it?
Oh. Every time I'm on the field, I always get asked that question.
Yeah.
And, you miss certain parts of it, right? Like, there's always going to be pieces that you're like, I could do without that. But going out there and competing against another team, that's always the priority number one. I think that's always going to be the part that I miss, the competition level, right? Going out there and knowing, like, okay, I think I'm better than you, and today I'm going to prove that.
Me and EA were kind of talking about this before we came on, the podcast. And literally, like, every time I walked and met a coach that I used to play for, or even former players that are out here, that's the first thing they ask you, like, do you miss it? And I miss the camaraderie of it, like the interaction with the coaches, the players. And I'll say it like this: there's no job that is kind of like the locker room. Like, there's no job in corporate America, there's no job anywhere else that's like the locker room. It's just a different place by different people, right? So, like, you miss that camaraderie. And like you said, the competitiveness of it. Like, that's another thing that you miss as well. But I'm not going to lie, I don't miss being in them trenches in 100 degrees right now, taking on double teams. I'm not going to lie and say I miss that.
Right.
So, let's shoot them straight. Practice takeaways. 30,000-foot view. What do you see out there today?
When you look at it, I think it was a mixed bag, right? Going into last year, I think the Jets defense literally dominated and took over this crossover practice. I would say it was more of a mixed bag when you talk about the Jets defense versus the Panthers offense. I think Dave Canales really dialed up some plays to script guys open. Bryce Young, he was under some duress, but not as bad as it was last year. And obviously not having Quentin Williams factors into that as well, right? But some of these Panther, receivers made some plays, which, kind of caught my eye, especially when you talk about having probably the best duo at corner in the NFL. So it was a mixed bag, 30,000-foot view, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the ball, and I'll let Q speak a little bit more on this, turning the football over. I think that was a surprise as well, too. I believe we had 4 today, if I'm not mistaken.
I think 4 in team drills.
Yeah, and then move the ball drill. Aaron Rodgers obviously really good all the way until they got up to the 3-yard line. Now, there's a caveat to that. Braylon Allen was called tackled at the 1. Gravity and physics let you know he was scoring that touchdown versus a corner on the edge. He was getting on the end zone, but for scripting purposes, they said he was down at, like, the 2-yard line. And
is that what they did there? I didn't know what was going on. I thought it might be a 2-point conversion or something. There's no way he was down.
There's no way he's not scoring there. So
it was like 245 pounds.
And then when you look at that, because they called him down, what happened the next 2 plays? Brees Hall has a fumble. We have an interception by Aaron Rodgers. So, again, mixed bag on both sides where, I think going into this, I think a lot of not just players and staff, but even Jets Nation was thinking that this would probably be dominance by the Jets after what they did last year.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think for me, I didn't get the benefit of watching them last year. I only watched it on TV, right? And so when you watch the clips and all those different things from Hard Knocks, One Jets Drive, it looked like a dominant performance, right? So when you come out here today, it definitely didn't look that same way. It looked a little bit more even, right? You saw Carolina's offense really making plays, and the Jets still had some good plays. I saw Garrett make a few great plays. One route was just amazing on a sail return. I mean, there's a few different routes that he really showed his ability, and it was against their top corner, J.C. Horn, too. So, there's a few – they had a little bit of a battle. Then defensively, right, you could see the Carolina Panthers able to move the ball in the run game, the pass game. They were able to keep their quarterback up tall. So, obviously having Quentin Williams not out there was a factor, I'm sure. He wasn't able to be as game-wrecking as he was last year. But I thought it was a good practice, just in terms of competition, right? Like, you would love to go out there and dominate, right? Like we talked about last week with the Washington Commanders, right? There was a dominant practice, right? And this one was a little bit more evenly matched. I think on paper these two teams should not be evenly matched, so I think you're going to go back in the lab and say, look, this wasn't good enough. But overall, I think guys were competing.
How much do you show here during
but that's
joint practice.
That's the thing,
you know?
right? So like you don't really open up the gambit,
Yeah.
And there's team scripted play drills where you're allowed to blitz at certain times. I was looking at some of our offense versus their defense, and Ejiro Evero comes from the Vic Fangio tree, right? He does bring pressure, but he does like his defensive line to get there. And I did see some things where they blitz. I even saw Albrecht, who, we're not a high blitzing team, but he showed a lot of simulated pressure. When I say simulated pressure, bringing linebackers down into the line of scrimmage, bringing safeties down, and then backing everybody out, right? And we saw Will McDonald get a free sack because they slid the whole offensive line, and he was scot-free off the edge. So, I mean, teams show some things. They don't show a lot, right? Because you don't really want to dive too far in your bag this early in training camp when you still have the whole season to play.
I stuck with the offense. We had Caroline Hendershot sticking with the defense today. It seems like there were a couple pleasantries exchanged between the Jets defense and the Panthers offense. Can you give us kind of a blow-by-blow? I'll be Jim Lampley. You're going to be my Harold Merchant.
Yeah, so, coming out in that first team period, Carolina had some success versus our defense. Their receiver, I believe, was Terrence Marshall, bigger body receiver. He was able to go up on a fade ball against DJ Reed and come down with the football. Now, he decided after he scored that, how receivers do, they're going to look down at the corner, let the ball, but the ball actually hit DJ Reed, so he looked at him and kind of tossed the ball onto him. Now, I don't even know if DJ Reed knew what was going on because he was turned the other way, but Chuck Clark and everybody else saw it. And you're like, you're not going to do that to my teammate. And, a little pushing and shoving happened there. But after that happened, I knew, like, every team period over here was going to be some type of fisticuffs or some type of scrummage happening. And literally that's what happened. I think the next team period, not sure who it was. It might have been Quincy Williams hit one of their running backs, like, hard. Again, everybody comes to the middle of the field. But that's what happens. Like, guys are out here competing. And usually once you get one altercation, EA – you're probably going to have multiple ones. Yeah.
Caroline actually told me it might have been Michael Clemens involved there with Hubbard.
Yeah, well, that was the second one.
Okay.
Was the third one.
There was three.
Yeah. So, it was on a run play. I think Mike thought one of the guards was pushing them after the play, and then they got into it. And then the third one happened when one of our linebackers hit their running backs, and then, the bench is cleared a little bit.
All right, we're going to flip it back to the defensive side of the ball. We're going back and forth. Offense, by and large, throughout training camp, the one thing that stands out more than anything else, they've protected the football. Yeah. This was very uncommon. Aaron threw to Lazard, short pass over the middle, came out high. I think you got to tell me if you're in the receiver room, if that's one that you want to have back. That's deflected. You mentioned the red zone period where the Jets move the field in their possession, at ease to right down the field. And that actually started with the pass that Quincy was talking about where Garrett had this unbelievable route. So Rodgers is in business. So before you know it, Brees fumbles, which you never see. And then it was like the very next play, he's looking in the end zone. Rodgers is for his favorite target, number 5, Garrett Wilson. I don't think he saw the linebacker.
No, yeah. And then the final one was, I think it was a little bit rushed, but Tyrod Taylor.
Correct.
They were going down the field. They actually did a no huddle after an incompletion,
which was surprising.
Right. And so then he drops back and throws it into double coverage.
So 4 and all.
Yeah, but I think the two that I that first one you talked about with Lazard, that's a tough one. I would love to watch it again, but it's always one of those things where if it's hot and over in the middle, it's hard for a receiver to always get your hands on it, especially when it's a short pass. So, as a receiver, I'm going to say maybe you take some heat off of it. But as a coach is probably going to tell you you got to come down with that.
Yeah.
You never want those things to go up high because then anybody can get it.
Tips and overthrows.
I knew you were going to go there, dudes.
Yeah, it's an interception. As far as the one in the back end zone, right? It looked like he was going 5 the whole way. Like that's who he wanted to go to. It looked like it was a corner stop, and the under on the other side was supposed to take that coverage away. Didn't take it away, so the corner stop. Garrett slipped. Yep. He tries to throw it to him. The guy's still standing there because the right didn't pull him out of the way. So it's a tough thing, man, and especially when you feel like that's where you want to go. That was kind of a mistake that he's going to want back.
I'm not worried about it because Brees has always protected the football, and Aaron Rodgers has protected the ball better than any quarterback in NFL history. It just happens. To me, It is one of those days.
Yeah.
It's a blip on the radar. I think a lot of people are thinking that Carolina is a team that is in rebuilding mode, and they certainly are. I don't know if this team is going to win many games this year. With that being said, you come out of this practice thinking you do have a lot to work on.
Yeah. And I think that's the good side of it, right? Because we talked about the EA last year, more specifically on the defensive side. They dominated this practice, right, up and down. We talked about it in the pre-show before practice. The offensive line, we didn't even know who the starting five was last year. So you thought this year with our starting five that they would maybe go out and dominate kind of like they did that one-team period versus the Commanders, and we didn't have that happen. So sometimes as a player, you need a reality check. Yeah. Sometimes you need practices like this to go back, look at the film, and be like, all right, guys, we're not where we need to be. Yeah. Let's continue to work, right? Mm-hmm. We still got 2 weeks before it gets real. Like, we see this. If we just show up and we're not executing at a high level, we can get beat by anybody. Right. Like, so sometimes you need practices like this just for the mental capacity of yourself to tell yourself we're not where we need to be yet.
Yeah. And I think you should never go into thinking you're invincible, right? Yeah. Like, you're always going to have mistakes, and it's great because then you have an opportunity to learn. If you go out here and every practice is like that Washington practice where we saw Garrett Wilson going up and down the field, then what do you gain, right? Mm-hmm. How do you grow? How do you learn? Like, you have to have these days so you're like, okay, I can't do this next time.
How about some players stock up, as Ethan Greenberg would like to say, at One Jets Drive? Olu Fashanu continues to pop, doesn't he? I mean, you have to be tremendously pleased about his progress if you are on that coaching staff or if you're a scout.
I think the biggest thing with him, and I was talking to Anthony Beck about this, is that he does all the little things. Yeah. And it's rare to have a young guy come in and just do all the little things, like finishing, right? Yeah. Like, that's not a technique thing. That's a mental thing. That's a toughness thing. Like, you see him every one play finish, and then making a transition. We talked about this earlier, EA. That's not an easy transition to make. Mm-hmm. He made it seamless today. Like, again, one-on-one pass rushing, we were live when that was happening, stifling guys with his punch at right tackle, opening up a hole for Isaiah Davis on a big touchdown run at right tackle. Like, again, you got to mentally tell yourself everything is different because your post leg is opposite, your kick leg is opposite, right? The angles at which you're taking on run blocking is opposite. And he did that, like, and it wasn't an issue for him at all. So, like, stock through the roof right now. And, again, you pray that your starting five is intact the whole season, but you're comfortable at tackle if he has to go in. Like, you're comfortable at tackle.
I hate to say Garrett Wilson, but Garrett Wilson, every day we're out here, no matter if it's New Jersey, if it's Carolina, if it's Italy, it doesn't matter. The dude just makes plays.
Yeah, that's it, man. He's a hell of a talent, man. And it's always fun to watch because he makes everything look the same. Like, his stride length doesn't change no matter what the route is. So as you're watching him, you can't tell what he's about to get into, right? So, like, when I talked about that sail with the return, right, he looks like he's going across the field, and then he stops on a dime, throws his guy by, and he's wide open on the sideline. So, those type of plays are just hard to defend. You can watch as much film as you want to, but if he doesn't give you a tell as a DB, you're going to have to trust your technique and hope that you're in the right spot at the right time. But with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, there is no right place at the right time, right? Because he can then put it in a perfect spot, and we've seen that time and time again. We actually saw it again. There was a great play, not Garrett Wilson, but then we had Xavier Gibson down the sideline, right? Rolling out, threw it to him wide open. I mean, he's going to find the open guy.
And I think that's another thing that we didn't talk about. Aaron Rodgers' mobility. I don't think I've seen him as mobile as he was today, which is great because we know that's part of his game, right? Being able to buy time. Multiple completions. The one you talked about, Xavier Gibson, was great on a comeback route, right? He buys time, gets out of the pocket, and Xavier Gibson uncovers and is available for his quarterback. So, again, I know that people were worried because he's older coming off the Achilles, but he showed that mobility today. So, if you're a Jets fan, you have to be excited about that because, Aaron, if he gets out that pocket, you know magic is happening.
It is a good point. So let's transition right there to 82. What is his role going to be in this offense? We know he's penciled in as the starting slot, but how productive can he be ultimately when he's working with a pair of receivers that are going to include ultimately Garrett Wilson, who's doing his damage out here right now, and Mike Williams?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I think it's kind of a wild card right now, honestly, because there's no way for us to really know until we see everybody out there. Now, I think he is doing a good job in the roles that they're putting him because I've seen him inside, I've seen him outside as well, right? So he's just doing a good job of being useful. And that's what you got to do as a young guy. Like, I remember my time as a young guy being out there. There were two veterans in front of me that really knew what they were doing. It's just about finding your way on the field and being useful. So, like, hey, I need you to go into X. I need you to go into Y, F. I need you to go into Z. Yeah. He can do that. Like, he's smart enough to get all that stuff down. And so that way, it doesn't matter where you need him at. He can fill in.
I really want to track his progress because he had the injury at the beginning of camp.
Yeah.
Had the tight hammy, and the Jets took a cautious approach, and now he's ramping up. Now he's getting more involved.
And the thing is, I think dependability, like Q was talking about, that's the biggest thing. When you're a young player, being able to be smart enough to learn multiple positions. Me and Q were actually talking about this earlier. They had Lazard in the slot and him on the outside, and I was surprised to see that. But I like that because you have to cross-practice at multiple positions, right? Because you just never know who's going to go down. And if you're available and coaches can depend on you, then the sky's the limit in regards to you getting opportunities. And that's what Xavier Gibson has been doing since he got here as an undrafted free agent.
Yeah.
Let's speak about the defensive line. You mentioned early on that Quinnen Williams held out of practice. He's got a minor shoulder issue.
Fine.
Yeah, he's going to be fine. What are you seeing from that group that includes Javon Kinlaw, who's put on 30 pounds in the offseason? We talked about that. Or Lecky Fotu, who's come over from Arizona, who's joined a new system. Solomon Thomas has a career high of sacks last year. He's part of that rotation as well. The other guy, a rookie, who's kind of making waves, who really wants to ascend, is Leonard Taylor as well.
So actually, also, bro, if you can, talk a little bit about Bruce Hector.
I was. Yeah, okay. Trust me, that's the name I was going to talk about.
Watching the game, I'm thinking the same as everybody else, Leonard Taylor, but you said Bruce Hector had a hell of a game.
If you go watch and break down the film, Bruce Hector had a heck of a game.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't show crazy on the stat sheet. He did miss a sack, and he has a real good feel. And when I say he has a real good feel, like when a 3 technique makes an inside move, right, he's getting pushed inside. He knows how to just play off of him. Now, he almost had a sack on Mariota. He just missed him, and he scampered for a first down in that last game versus the Commanders. But against the run, nobody's been able to move him. He's been in the right place, right time. And then even today, I saw him make a couple plays on the run and in pass rushing one-on-one. So he's a guy I know that came on late last year. I think he has a real good shot to stick on this team. Like, if you go watch that film, and I know Leonard Taylor had some smash plays, great pass rush move, getting on the edge, speed to power, and getting off that and getting the sack. The other play was kind of a bust by the offensive line. The guard went the wrong way.
Okay. Again,
you got to make the play. If play's there to be made, you make it. But Bruce Hector played really well in that game versus the Commanders and practiced really well out here today.
That's an outstanding point. So Chris Evans, our TD out here, tells us that we've already been speaking for 20 minutes.
And it didn't even seem like it.
We have not talked about we have not talked about Hassan Reddick.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's not here at camp. The reason why I bring up Reddick is, what are we seeing from the edge position right now?
Well, to me, why he's so pivotal, and me and EA had this conversation. When you look at the Jets D-line and the way they've had success, there's always been another defensive tackle besides Quinnen that could rush. Quentin Jefferson, Sheldon Rankins. I think this year maybe it's Solomon Thomas, but they planned on moving Jermaine Johnson in that spinner role inside.
Okay.
And having to sign outside with Will McDonald. We saw it towards the end of last year with Bryce Huff, right? He would sometimes stand up inside, sometimes Jermaine would, and the other guy would be outside. So I think that's missing right now from that package because Hassan Reddick is not here. It'd be interesting if the starters even play, which I doubt they do in any preseason game, or maybe even next week versus the Giants. Do they start bringing out that quote-unquote NASCAR package?
Yeah.
Right? And then who's going to be a part of it since Hassan Reddick isn't here? So we were talking about some guys that have played really well. Eric Watts, the young kid from UConn, has come on strong. Tech McKinley, people forget, is a former first-round pick.
Yes.
The biggest thing with him is health. He had a couple good rushes today as well, too. So if he can stay healthy.
I thought he flashed back in Florham Park the previous practice as well.
For sure. So, that's the biggest thing, right, when you talk about the depth in regards to getting to the quarterback because, again, we plan on Aaron Rodgers being healthy. If he is, the Jets will have a league, which they haven't been able to play with the last couple of years, right? Where does that extra rush guy come from, right? When you're talking about a guy that is a bigger body that can push the pocket and actually create havoc inside. We've had Sheldon Rankins. We've had Quentin Jefferson. Who's going to be that guy for the Jets opposite of Quinnen Williams?
Well, Quinnen Williams is going to be there, Q.
Yeah.
But hopefully Hassan is not too far behind either because this whole equation could look completely different if those two guys are gone, right?
Dangerous.
Yeah. So You mentioned last week there were about 30 players or so who didn't suit up against the Commanders.
Yeah.
Where the Jets are at in their program and at this point in summer, do you take a similar approach in week 2 if you're Robert Saleh?
I believe so. I think it'll be just like last year when none of the starters play. And I think that's been the message by Saleh the whole time, right? Maybe eyeing that third game potentially. And now it seems like maybe even not even then. You know, it's just so weird. We were talking about this, EA, with Carolina earlier, like the approach in regards to cross practices versus preseason reps. Like, to me, I think you need at least 2 series in the preseason, right? Yeah. Just because it's just there's nothing like, and Q said this earlier, there's nothing like game-like reps, right? Again, you can have all the blitz periods, all the third down, all the specialized red zone periods. It's different when there's no script and you got to go out there and play when the lights are bright, right? When you have to react to what the offense is doing, when you have to adjust to something. Like, I think each player needs to go through that, even veterans, right? Yeah. Because you got to think it's, 7 months since you put on the pads and played in the game, 7, 8 months. So I always like for veterans to get at least 2 drives in the preseason just to feel good. And I've talked to a lot of quarterbacks. They're like, they like to get that hit out of the way, too, before getting hit in a regular season, right? Now, again, you want to be smart. You don't want nobody getting hurt in the preseason. But I just think there's nothing that equates to actual game reps in the preseason game, even though you're doing the cross practices.
Do you guys want Rodgers to play in that third preseason game a couple plays against the Giants, or that's a non-story?
No.
It doesn't matter. Whatever he wants. No?
Well,
as a player,
yeah,
I would like to. I would like to see him.
Like if you're Garrett Wilson.
If I'm a player,
yeah.
yes. Yes. As a fan, as a spectator, as an analyst, no.
Okay, yeah.
I'll say this, and Q knows this. Players and coaches are superstitious.
Yeah.
If you look at what happened last year, Aaron Rodgers played in the third preseason game.
No, yeah.
We opened up on Monday Night Football.
Look at you, dudes.
Yeah.
We opened up on Monday Night Football last year. What did we open up on this year?
The Webs, I see.
Yeah.
Saleh's my guy. He's superstitious. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is playing.
Yeah. I thought one of the greatest examples of where we're at this summer is it's always about, hey, how are young guys progressing, especially on a Jets roster that, listen, there's not a lot of starting battles going on out there. I mean, it's pretty much set across the board. So Isaiah Davis, he's had a very good camp.
Yep.
Today, you mentioned Olu Fashanu sealing that right side, and he scoots in for a touchdown. Then later on in practice, it's a 2-minute drill. Tyrod Taylor goes through his progressions, and he's got Isaiah Davis across the field, and he hits him. And Isaiah Davis, he wanted to be 20 yards. He wanted to be 20 yards down the field before that ball got there. But this is what it's all about, the summertime.
Downs, yes, of course. You know, you got to go through that process.
Correct.
It's not going to be perfect, you know, and you got to go through just learning, like, okay, you know, this is what happens. It's like I said earlier, you're not going to have a perfect practice, and if you want that perfect practice, you're looking for the wrong thing out here. You want those mistakes. You want to learn from those. Obviously, as a coach, like one thing I said when I first got here in 2014 was it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, and I think it can be looked at the wrong way, right? Because it can be looked at as though you're being lazy, but it's honestly like you're working on those small things before you get to the big part, right? So you got to understand that it's not going to happen overnight, and you know, he's going to learn that, right? Yeah. Like, I'm sure he felt so great after Saturday, and then today, even though he had some good plays, that one play probably is weighing on him.
Oh, it's sticking on his head for sure.
But you know, you got to learn from it. You got to go into the meeting rooms, and the coach is going to be like, "Listen, man, it's all good. You're going to learn from this."
And the next time around, he's going to make that play.
Oh,
exactly.
for sure.
Yeah.
And it's all about like the growth, like you said. Like we saw it last week in the Commanders game. Jarek Bernard-Converse, great coverage on De'Ami Brown. That's just a offensive player and a quarterback putting the ball where only the receiver can catch it. But then we saw him dominate.
I heard him talking up Brown on his other job.
Yeah.
You know?
But then we saw Converse dominate the rest of the game. And even out here, a couple PBUs, like he's really come on strong.
Yeah, definitely.
So are we talking enough about the Jets cornerback depth? Because JBC and then Stiggers is a kid who has put his head in there, and this is not too big for him.
And that's the thing. We were talking about it earlier, EA. It's just like it's going to be some tough decisions.
Yeah.
Real tough. And it's just like teams will scour this roster for talent, right? Because we haven't even talked about Isaiah Oliver, who they brought in this offseason, who's been a consummate pro, played a lot of slot corner. It's weird that both of our top slot corners are out right now. So that gives opportunity to guys like, you know, Stiggers and also Bernard-Converse. So great depth at the cornerback position. It's gonna be tough. And the thing about Bernard-Converse, he played safety too before, right? So he has that ability to cross over. So that's gonna make him valuable on a 53-man roster. I think that gives him an edge over a lot of guys.
Receiver position. I saw a couple of the beat writers today write about roster projections. They said 7 receivers.
That's hefty.
Yeah.
Well, we can go through it, right?
Let's do it.
Garrett,
Yep.
Mike,
Yep.
Gibson,
Yep.
Lazard, Corley.
Correct.
There's 5.
Yep.
I think those are the ones that are solidified for
Right.
sure.
Okay, and we'll have time to do this. Irv Charles is a
That's
special
definitely-
teams
yeah.
werewolf.
Gunner.
Okay, and then Brownlee.
Yeah. McCutcheon made some plays.
Cousin made a nice play from
Yeah.
Tyrod on a go ball today.
Malik Taylor's and
And
also
Taylor.
other guys who had some experience or
Yeah.
whatever. But 7 just seemed to me like that might be
I think
a
it's
lot.
going to be
Yeah.
6.
6 sounds more
Yeah.
realistic. But it all depends on everything else, right? Because it's not just relying on the receivers.
Mm.
Where are you everywhere else? Like if you think you need more of a receiver than somewhere else, then you might go 7. That's why it's so hard to do those roster projections because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, you know. But if you go 7, I mean, who do you put there, right? Like that's a tough thing. Like that guy has to have not only receiver skills but also
Special team.
skills,
And I think
you know?
that's the conversation with
Right.
Brownlee.
Right.
We talked about this earlier, Q. He's more of a receiver type. He's
Right.
got to become a special teams
Exactly.
guy. And Irv Charles, does he take over just the special teams ace role, or can he help out on offense? Like that's the
Right.
question as well. Do they just look at him as a specialist or a receiver? You know?
By and large, is it fair to say that the Jets are in a good spot here in mid-August, but there is work to be done?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
I think today showed, we all kind of figured that they would come out and dominate. That didn't happen. And, again, I think that's a good thing, right? Because now there's things you need to work on. You just can't come out here and think it's going to be sweet, right? You have to go out and execute, play in and play out. And we know Aaron Rodgers is really big when it comes to the details of things, right? So that'll be something they talk about in meetings. And I think it's a good thing, especially you having it the second week of preseason as you get closer to the season starting, that there's things you need to work on.
NFL's hard.
Yes,
You
it
gentlemen
is.
know that.
It is.
Combined 16
And it's
years
not
of
for long,
experience.
NFL.
This was fun. Thanks, guys.